Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Casio. In an interview with Fox News, U.S. President Donald Trump said that Russian drones shouldn't be flying close to Polish territory, reiterating his disappointment with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump also criticized European members of NATO for their continued purchases of Russian oil, saying such a move would help end the war in Ukraine.
So I'm disappointed. If you listen to some people, the ones like in Poland were shot down and they fell into Polish territory, but they shouldn't have been that close anyway. They were drones. And
do you think it was a mistake? The Polish Prime Minister said it was not a mistake, that they were intentionally into Polish territory.
I can't comment on whether it was a mistake or not. They shouldn't have been there, let's face it. But supposedly they were disabled. When the European Union nations or the NATO nations, because they're similar, very similar, when they're buying oil from Russia, that's not the greatest thing. That's not the deal. And I let it be known, and people were surprised to hear that, but they were doing it quietly and slyly. And you can't do that. If you're going to win, you're going to have to not buy oil from Russia.
Poland's government has announced that strengthening public institutions and improving the rule of law will be one of its top priorities in the years ahead. Minister Maciej Berek, responsible for government policy oversight, announced the outline of the plan on Friday. He said the priority, called an efficient state, will focus on restoring the rule of law, reforming courts and the prosecution, and expanding access to health care and education. Berek stressed that efforts would require close cooperation across the justice, health, digitalization and education ministries and others. Maciej Berek also announced new digital tools for the health sector, such as a centralized e-visit registration process, broader use of electronic medical records and artificial intelligence. Other goals include expanding childcare availability, modernizing sports facilities and supporting teachers in adapting to modern challenges. Construction on the biggest battery storage plant in Poland has started in the north of the country. The facility, which will cost 350 million euros, will be operated by PGE, one of the biggest energy firms in Poland, and is just one in a series of such projects crucial for the country's energy transition.
This is the Baltic Sea, where offshore towers are rising to power Poland's future. But wind is not always blowing, so the country needs to invest in energy storage solutions. Construction on one such facility, the most powerful in the country, has just started in Żarnowiec, in Poland's north, by PGE, one of Poland's biggest energy firms.
This facility will be one of the biggest in Europe and one of the most high-tech. It's a major investment in stability and opens new horizons.
Almost one-third of Polish electricity came from renewables last year, with the share forecasted to rise to more than half by 2030. The grid is already barely keeping up with this change, with operators forced to discard power or keep the system stable. In 2024, they discarded enough electricity to power 330,000 homes for a year. Without storage solutions, even more renewable energy will go to waste.
Making renewables more effective is one of the top priorities for this government, and we will particularly support the development of energy storage solutions, beginning with large-scale ones.
The government is also hell-bent on using as much local components in the green transition as possible, and Poland is in luck. LG has located the biggest battery gigafactory in Europe in the country. The South Korean company will provide the batteries for the Żarnowiec project.
We have a declaration from our partner that 100% of batteries used in this storage facility will be manufactured in Poland. Overall, the share of local content here is around 75%, which is unique for this class of project. No other country in Europe comes close to that value.
If everything goes according to plan, the facility will come online in 2027. 10 years from now, PGE wants to have enough storage to be able to power 2.5 million homes for an entire day.
Hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets of French cities calling for a wealth tax, increased spending on public services and for the budget cuts outlined by the government of the former Prime Minister François Bayrou to be axed.
Paris, Marseille, and Toulouse. These are just some of the French cities where strikes and demonstrations took place on Thursday as trade unions called for nationwide protests to oppose the government's planned budget cuts.
The government needs to understand that we're fed up with austerity, that there are real measures that need to be taken to save France, but these aren't the ones that need to be taken against workers.
Protesters, which included teachers, train drivers, pharmacists, hospital staff, and even school and university students, blocked roads and streets in major cities, causing widespread disruptions to public transport in the capital and beyond. According to the organizers, 1 million people turned out, but the Interior Ministry put that number at 500,000, with 80,000 police officers deployed. Small-scale clashes broke out between police and protesters in Paris, as well as Lyon and Nantes. More than 300 people were detained across France, according to the country's Interior Ministry.
We're tired of paying for others. I'm going to talk about my case. I've been with the post office for 33 years. I earn a net salary of 1,400 euros, so it's a struggle. We can't make ends meet. So it has to stop, and those who have the money need to pay. That's it.
The nationwide protests come barely a week after French President Emmanuel Macron's close ally Sébastien Lecornu was appointed Prime Minister following the toppling of François Bayrou's government. Bayrou's unpopular $51 billion deficit reduction plan to curb public debt caused him to lose a confidence vote in the National Assembly last week. Now the burden falls on new Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, who, according to analysts, will most likely share the fate of his predecessor.
It's obvious that some kind of concessions should be made for his government to continue. But at the same time, even if he will present the same budget or the slightly adopted budget, maybe with only slight compromises, most likely he will face the same destiny as his predecessor.
Lecornu, who is yet to assemble a cabinet, has opened talks with opposition parties and unions this week in an attempt to form a government that can survive future confidence votes. But whether the new French Prime Minister will be able to strike a balance between cuts demanded by the right and tax increases on the wealthy demanded by the left remains to be seen.
The US has vetoed the draft United Nations Security Council resolution for the 6th time. The draft demands an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The document also calls for the release of all captives held by Hamas, as well as for lifting of restrictions on humanitarian aid into Gaza.
France reiterates its opposition to any plan of occupation of the Gaza Strip and forced displacement of its population. It calls on Israel to put an end to this destructive campaign and to resume as quickly as possible negotiations with a view to a ceasefire and the release of all the hostages. China is deeply disappointed by the result of today's vote. The conflict in Gaza has been dragging on for nearly 2 years, causing an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. Time and again, the Security Council has attempted to take action only to be forcefully blocked by the United States. We cannot help but ask how many more innocent lives must be lost before a ceasefire can be achieved in Gaza.
This draft resolution represents the bare minimum that humanity, legality, and morality dictate. It is deeply regrettable and painful that it has been blocked, preventing the Security Council from playing its rightful role in the face of these atrocities and to protect civilians in the face of genocide.
We would like to thank the United States for showing leadership and moral conviction by vetoing this biased resolution.
Political campaigns are intensifying across the Czech Republic with just 2 weeks to go until the parliamentary elections. Aleksandra Bulenda is in Prague and walks us through what's at stake and currently what resonates with voters young and old.
The Czech parliamentary elections has reached its final stage and final stretch, and Prime Minister Petr Fiala is calling it a clear-cut choice, him or Andrej Babiš. Launching a hot phase of his Spolu coalition campaign, Fiala warned that a fragmented vote could hand power to ANO, the SPD and the pro-Russian Stachilo party alliance. Well, his pitch says, don't vote with your heart, vote with reason to keep the country on a pro-Western course. But other parties definitely are not slowing down. Stan's Vít Rakušan is positioning his mayors as third option, while the Pirates continue to promise housing reforms and anti-corruption drives. Mind you, now on the right we have to look at the Tomio Okamura's SPD that is making noise with populist roadshows, selling sausages and railing against migration, Ukraine aid and the euro itself. The party is polling third and aims for government, but remains deeply divisive. Now meanwhile, in mock elections held in schools here in Prague and in the vicinity of Prague, held in over 600 high schools, students favored Spolu, Pirates and Stan. Interestingly enough, ANO and SPD fared poorly, while the satirical Motorists Party surprisingly surged in vocational schools, and students actually claim that the party itself is very interesting. Divide between generations and ideologies is definitely wide, and we'll be watching it closely as it plays out every step of the way. From Prague for TVP World, I'm Aleksandra Bulenda.
Bulgarian Prime Minister Rosen Željazkov's government has survived a fifth no-confidence vote. The cabinet, which took office in January this year, will continue its work.
These past 2 days have been a real test for the current Bulgarian Prime Minister and his government. However, 101 deputies ended up voting in favor and 133 against its dissolution on Thursday. This was his government's fifth no-confidence vote since January. Željazkov said he will continue working for stability. The cabinet is supported by the Movement for Rights and Freedom New Beginning, led by politician Delian Pievsky, who is under U.S. Magnitsky Act sanctions for his involvement in systemic corruption.
This motion of no confidence was not successful, and the government will press on with its work. It continues to work for stability in the country, and we as a nation cannot continue to build our political positions through hatred.
The motion was initiated by the government's main opposition coalitions, Morality, Unity and Honor, and We Continue the Change Democratic Bulgaria, which accused the authorities of failures in internal security and justice.
We have for the first time managed to unite the opposition, which has its differences, sometimes very serious ones. More no-confidence votes are coming.
During the vote, a protest took place outside parliament in support of the mayor of Varna and the deputy mayor of Sofia, who are currently in custody over allegations of involvement in a major corruption scheme. This was followed by anti-government demonstrations.
The current government hasn't just accepted the failure to fight corruption in the Ministry of Interior as something normal, it actually tolerates criminal groups within the Interior Ministry.
The current Prime Minister Željazkov's cabinet is the ninth government since 2021, when large-scale civil protests against corruption under former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov and his party led to the emergence of new anti-establishment parties.
Marcin Zajanowski, a professor at the University of Warsaw, has just won the 2025 IG Nobel Prize in Psychology. The scholar investigated the impact of praise on a narcissist.
If you're special and you know it, clap your hands.
And Professor Marcin Zajanowski is right to join in the applause, as he and his colleague Gilles Gignac just won a Nobel Prize. Well, an Ig Nobel Prize. It's a satirical prize awarded annually since 1991 to promote public engagement with scientific research, and it handles very serious topics.
We made an important discovery. Drunken